are at Spooky Review. It's Friday, and we're here for another spooky review. Aren't you so excited?
Once I have my coffee, I'll be fine.
He is really, really excited. I'm
excited.
He has been chatting me up all week about this, and this morning, he just could not stop talking about this. Right. In fact, I had to tell him, like, whoa, Nelly, slow down. You are talking way too much early in the mornings.
Yeah. I was practicing my diction. I eat New York. I eat New York. Ow now, brown cow. Ow now, brown cow.
Actually, it was kind of reverse, right? I was talking to him while he was taking a shower. That I found at the dollar store, which is called Shadows and Fog. I couldn't read that backwards. $1 at the dollar store. It's a Woody Allen film. It's a murder mystery, but in his fashion, it is quirky, and I love quirky, but I thought maybe we could even possibly just mention this in maybe the next review that we do, because it is a murder mystery. But we'll see. It might be just a really, really quick little, kind of let you know how it was. I have a feeling I'm going to really like that one.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving. You're already full throttle.
Yeah, and Fridays are Bliss Friday Love Letter days too, so I'm up early at like 5 getting that ready and all that good stuff, because that takes me a couple hours. So by the time he wakes up, I am talking his ear off in the morning. So,
yes.
We have 2 movies that we're going to review for you guys today. Let's just get right into it. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Let's get back into it.
Oh, you're going to have to do that again.
How come? I don't expect perfection.
Face.
Okay. All right, let's get back into it. First movie.
I have to wake up.
Why are you
preparation
taking a deep breath?
Because I need to get oxygen in my brain so I can get ready to think. I'll just use finger puppet. I think the movie is good.
It's a Canadian horror independent film, and the classification is violent. Now, it definitely lived up to that, right?
Yeah.
I don't typically like violent, and so from now on, I'm really going to be looking at the classifications, because I like more psychological, horror films. I'm not good with blood and guts and violence. I can manage a little bit, and so oftentimes I'll be doing this when there's stuff, because, even at movies, even with jump scares in movies, I know there's going to be jump scares. I bring a scarf so that if it's kind of see-through, I just kind of hold it up, because I get scared, and I don't like to be jump scared. Or I'll if I know the movie has a lot of jump scares, these are just little tips to help you. You could put earplugs in, or just plug your ears when you know a jump scare is coming, because it's the music that really has a lot to do with scaring you. I think it was well made. Do you agree with that?
I think so.
Okay. It was well made, and if you don't have a problem with blood and guts and violence, I think you're probably going to love this movie. But I do want to give a little disclaimer here. There's a lot of sexual violence in this, or implied sexual violence. So it's a trigger for anybody who has been, sexually assaulted. I would say stay away from this movie, because it's going to be a trigger for you. I think for anyone watching this, it's very, I would classify it as disturbing. What do you think?
Well, yeah, because I didn't even know what to expect, because we just chose that looks kind of creepy. Let's check that movie out.
Yeah.
So as you're watching it, you're like, whoa, this is pretty intense. So I wasn't expecting all that.
Yeah.
Additional storyline, but it was definitely effective.
And it starts off with us kind of meeting the main character, and she's a well-known fiction writer of horror. And she's very successful. She's married. Her husband's kind of almost like her agent. There's calls coming in for her. Her book's blowing up. It starts off with an interview. you know, and then they keep kind of flashing back, as I recall, to her childhood.
Yeah.
Where she's got a sister and kind of showing us the love that she has for, like, where her humble beginnings started.
Her ambitions and wanting to write ghost stories and that whole thing.
And it starts off with her, you know, so we see her kind of as a successful writer, and then it flashes into they're in a station wagon. Her sister's in the back. She's in the front with her mom, and she's reading her mom one of her stories, and her mom's totally into it, like really, you know, supportive. And then for whatever reason, the dad is not in the picture. And you can glean that there's some kind of like bitterness and something did not work out right. I think that the father is just absent. And the daughter is in the back, and did you feel that it was kind of almost like a jealousy thing, the sister?
Well, it's a typical thing that you see when you see stories like this. You see stories that there's siblings involved, separation. It's either the father is taking the kids, or they're going somewhere, or the mother, and there's always one sibling who's kind of wanting to move, or or angry at the parent, or just bitter and just hates everything. You know, that was like a typical first impression of them, like, oh, okay, this is the dynamic that
it's like a platform, or not a platform, but a setting. It's like
there's always one, you know, if you see a mother taking the kids, and then there's always that one kid who wants to be with the father, or there's some tension there, but it's implied.
Yeah, so the sister in the back, I don't know if she's older or she's younger. I couldn't figure that out.
I think
older. I think she's older.
Yeah, she's older, I believe.
I think she's an older sister, but anyway, there's conflict between her and her sister, and she's actually, the sister in the back seat is really like doing all the things that I can't stand, which is like people she's really excited about her writing. Her mom is super supportive, and then she's in the back just putting her down for everything, all her dreams, because she's so bitter, right? So we see why there's this conflict going on, but we don't really get the whole backstory of what they've been through. We just know they've been through stuff. Yeah. And the mom is moving them out of their state and into a new house because their kind of wacky, crazy aunt has died, and she's like really into dolls. And when you get to the house, the whole house is filled with dolls, which in itself freaks people out, right? But she filled her entire kind of rickety old house. It's like a Victorian style
farmhouse,
or a farm. It's like a old farmhouse. It's nice, but it's creepy, right? Like it looks really rickety, like she hasn't done anything to it, and it needs a really good, you know, kind of refresher and a paint job and stuff, and cleaned up and remove all the other kind of creepy stuff inside. But the whole story is what happens on the way to the house, which is where you kind of get the run-in, where they run in. There's like a creepy candy man kind of van that passes them. And the story really like gets unpacked from there. And it's very ominous.
It starts kind of fast too.
Yeah.
To that point. Like all that we just talked about happens fast. It's not, you know, we're actually talking a lot more about it than watching the movie. You're gonna see it go fast, what we just talked about.
Yeah, so it's very clear from the beginning, like who the antagonists are.
Yeah.
The protagonists and the antagonists, you see the setup of the challenges that the family is already kind of dealing with, but they're managing it and how they're doing. And then you see the characters that are clearly give you this ominous, stressful feeling, and for good reason, because they show up later. So we're not going to give you the spoilers on that, but with the disclaimer and everything else that you need to know, it is a very violent movie. It's very scary. It's very well done. I think the psychological aspect is definitely there.
Keeps you intrigued if you're into psychological stuff.
Yeah, it's not just violent. It is psychological, because at a certain point, weren't you like, whoa, I didn't realize that was happening. And I'm not going to tell you because
it fooled us.
we were fooled
confused
by the story.
Like, whoa, what happened? I'm like, oh.
It took a turn, and then it was like, oh my God, everything that we thought we were seeing was not actually what we were seeing.
And then from that point on, it felt like, okay, what's really going on? Like, I think that was a way to really grab you.
Yeah.
Because everything was kind of intense in some way, but then there was this moment of hope. In part of the first third of the movie, near the third middle, you have this hope happening, like, okay, something seemed to work out, but then something happens in the movie and how they did things to make you go, oh, and this is not good.
And they do that a couple times, actually.
They give you, like,
you get it a couple of times, right? Like, where you think that it's okay, and then it's not, and you realize something that you thought the whole time was actually not that at all. Yeah. And then there's another part towards the end of the movie where you're hopeful again, and then it turns out to be,
I kind of predicted that part a little bit,
looping you right back into the nightmare of it all. Yes. And so we're not going to give you how the ending is, because you got to watch the movie, but I think that it is definitely worthy of watching. I think it kept me guessing the whole time. It was freaky, like it was disturbing. It was really freaky. It was a psychological, like, horror in your head of what was going on. You're not going to be able to figure out what's actually happening until you watch this whole movie, because
definitely there's a lot of fractional things, inspiration from other movies.
Like what?
Well, I can't tell them what parts, but there's things from other known movies that they use, but they did it in their own unique way.
But you could say which
like what? Like how the introduction and the certain scenarios, crazy people, those type of things come in. And I don't want to say too much because I think that'll give away some stuff.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
that's the disturbing part of it. There's disturbing individuals in here that are clearly like in the caliber of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're just completely like barely human, right? Like you can't even fathom somebody. Like that's the freaky and disturbing aspect of this movie.
Yeah, but it was good. I wouldn't want to watch it again.
No, I would never watch it again.
It's certain movies. Some people like that stuff and watch it. It's crazy for the storyline or whatever, for whatever reason, because there are people who like those type of movies. Yes. So that's more power to them. But someone like me, I'm not. No. I'm like,
we're never watching that again. Yeah, it's like
you watch it once, you take in, but then we can move on and talk about other things about that.
Yeah, movie. It made me go, okay, first of all, it's nightmare worthy, right? Would you say?
Well, if you have things in your past or something.
Yeah. Or if you're just sensitive to this kind of material. It's nightmare worthy. For some people, it will cause nightmares. Because it's just the mere disturbingness of it. I don't even know if that's a word, but the fact that you just thinking that there are people out there that disturbing, it's or that disturbed is nightmare worthy.
And it's real. There's a sense of realness.
Like it could happen.
That stuff can happen, and it's
it has happened.
It does happen. That's why those storylines get put together, because in some form of another, one way or another, some of those events have happened.
Yeah. So. How many screams would you give this? From 1 to 5, how many screams would you give it?
I would probably say in storyline, probably 4. In creepiness, a 5 for sure.
Oh, that's
a lot. Like scary, like that part, not like watch it again kind of scary, but if you're into like going whoa and just kind of, I think it was 4 or 5 range in between there.
So a 4 and a 5, if you cut it down the middle, you'd be a 4.5.
Yeah, I think probably right in the middle. I think a 5 if I wanted the ending to be how I wanted it. I was hoping to be. So I give it like 4.5 screams.
If for me, I think I will give it 4.5 screams as well.
I always try to grasp on the lesson. I always want to kind of feel like I'm not wasting it, or what is the bigger lesson sometimes that you could get from a movie, regardless of it's gory or anything like that. So from this lesson in the movie, because I guess that might be my area of expertise here. It seems like the lesson that you could get from this movie, I think, is certain things just happen in life, and you just and it's not always depending what it is. Sometimes some things you just move on, and you just got to learn how to work through, tragedies and things that happen bad to you. So it's like, okay, well, you survive and you don't go out without a fight. I think that's the kind of thing. And there's that premise in the beginning that we didn't really touch about.
Yeah, we didn't.
And understanding if you're in any situation of adversity, you just have to fight through it, because you have your goals and your dreams to go after. So you do whatever you could do. That's those type of messages I got from it.
Yeah, and you reminded me too that there's another element of how fragile we are, like mentally, emotionally, with stress and anxiety, and part of how the human brain copes with extreme circumstances. And that's the part that, it's very fascinating as part of the story to see how these girls are coping with what's going on without telling you the story. There are those elements of seeing the human condition under those types of extreme circumstances, and what your brain does to protect you. So I thought that was really good.
So that's also I think
very good. A good summary and assessment. Boop. Moving on, let's go to the next one. So the next one that we're going to review is called No One Gets Out Alive. And this is another Netflix movie. It says it's based on books. And I believe that The Ritual was a book that I also have seen on Netflix. I haven't watched it yet, but I don't know if that's the same one or not. But this movie is based off of a couple different books, I guess, kind of put together. And the classification for this is ominous and scary. It's definitely a psychological thriller as well. It's definitely ominous and scary. The story starts off as a young woman who is fleeing her country. So it's real fast in the beginning. She's there. You kind of get introduced to her because a door to the back of a truck is opened and you see all these people in there. And so you understand that she's escaping her country. She's coming here illegally. I think
Mexico.
She's coming from Mexico to the United States. I think she's in New York, but don't quote me. You see her immediate struggle, the things that most people would have to do. They have to find a job. They have to find a job that will hire.
Pittsburgh.
Oh, you remember that?
Or I think it was in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Somewhere, I think it might have been Pittsburgh.
So I was close.
Whatever.
So she's in Pennsylvania somewhere. She has to find a job, and she has to find a job that will take her as a non-citizen. She doesn't have a green card. She has an uncle that lives out there, and she kind of lied to him and told him that she was born in the United States, even though she was in Mexico. And this uncle clearly doesn't really know her. He's never met her before, but he has a big job, I guess. And all of this is alluded to. We don't.
To her mom.
He's a cousin to the mom. Yeah. So he's not even her uncle, but, is that right?
Yeah, it's like a second cousin.
Yeah. And I don't know if she even calls him cousin or uncle.
Yeah, sometimes others call him uncle because it's like a form of respect of adult. So they put uncle.
Yeah, because I think she calls him
that's
uncle.
Irrelevant.
Yeah, so anyway, the implication is that she's getting out there. She kind of lied to him to be able to get an interview set up, to get a job. She wants to help her family and she wants a better life. Okay, so that's the implied story. Then she has brought money with her, so she has money to get started, to pay for a place to live. And this is where the house is almost an entity in itself, right? Like you look at it, and I remember saying as soon as I saw the house, I was like, whoa, like the house is this huge, ominous looking house. Clearly that whoever owns it is renting it out to people. They rent the rooms, and they have this kitchen and use of the house, but not the entire house. There's certain places that are off limits. It's just locked. He says there's only 2 people in the house, and yet throughout the story, she sees other people lingering. And it's just very dark, very ominous. And they slowly build up to, there's a lot of weird things that she's seeing. She's hearing things through the vents. She's seeing other girls that are there when he said there was only her and one other person.
It's just like the creepy landlord synopsis.
Yeah. And yet there's something relatable. There is something somewhat relatable to him. So the whole time he is somewhat relatable, but also you don't trust him, and he's also a little scary. And then you find out somewhere in there shortly after that he also has a brother that's living there, but we don't see him until later on. And then there's parts in this where you're like, oh my God, she's so stupid. Like,
gotta have that, because that's a typical thing, but then that's what the movie does. It makes you go, oh, don't anxiety. Do that. Like, oh, why would people do that?
Like he tells her study is off limits, and then
I'm always the part of the reason, my honey, it's a movie. That's the way these are constructed, to give us this anxiety and how stupid, and us talking to the screen.
Yeah, so they're doing exactly what is necessary, right?
If you're a parent, you'd be like, oh my goodness.
Why are you doing that? So, like he tells her there's areas that are off limits, and then she, when he walks away and she can hear him somewhere in the house, she goes in and it's not just like peeking in, she's going in there and like touching things and she's in there, which seems like so long. It's like, oh my God, like that's ridiculous. Girl. Don't you know you're in danger? Stop, So the more that we're doing this, the more that you can see that there's certain things that they do on purpose, and before we're, not reviewing, you would go like, oh, that's so stupid. Nobody would do that. Or, but people do stuff like that. But now you see that it's actually part of what they do, because they're creating and building anxiety, because this girl should not be in there.
Trouble's coming along.
Yeah, this is not going to end well for her. This is not a good idea. She should be up in her room with her door locked because he's creepy. There's another ominous figure that we don't even know about. But when she goes into this room, you start to see some archaeological stuff in there. You get signs of
research and
the parents, and so you start to get fed a little bit more of the story from the man landlord that we get to know. He starts to confide a little bit more of the story of, what his parents did and all this different stuff. So without telling you any of the story, because I don't want to ruin any of it, there is an interesting archaeological aspect to this.
Yes, I think it's it taps into any Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah. If you're like, because that was a huge thing when that movie came out, right? And that's, of course, not a scary movie, but that type of thing intrigues people, because there's artifacts, historical significance, rituals that people study from old civilizations. So there's something there on that, and what the people who lived at this now renting out to people were part of, and that's something that's intriguing.
Yeah.
And that could kept me in, because I was like, oh, okay, this isn't me. I'm all about like knowing historical significance. If they plug in something, that is always a trigger for me. I don't know, everyone's different. Everyone wants to wait and see what's going on in a different part of the storyline, but in my particular, I'm always interested if there's something I could keep in historical thing, because me liking history, everyone's different. I like to see how are they using it, and how are they using that to captivate me. Yeah,
so it anytime that they tell a different story that you can't guess.
Yes.
Right? Like where you're like, oh, I don't know where they're going with this, because they're talking about some archaeology, something. They're showing us little sacred kind of tools or different things, but we don't know what they mean. We don't know where they come from, the significance, and they're kind of spoon feeding us little pieces at a time, and also of the archaeological story. And then they're also
do that quick though too. They don't give you too
but
much.
then they're also spoon feeding us who is dangerous.
Yeah.
And understanding more about what is happening inside this huge ominous house. So I feel like there's a lot of antagonists in this story. Like the house alone is an antagonist.
Yes.
As well as, you know, the people that she should be afraid of. There's a lot of story going on that you wouldn't guess right away. And then, of course, there's a lot of suspense being built up to kind of get you to the summit of, you know, the very end of what's really happening.
And the ending was different too, for sure. But it's always good how people could be creative with entities.
Yeah.
Or ghosts or creatures or something like, oh, that's a new design.
Yeah.
You know, like famous, like Predator, like that creature, like that was very unique. Or
I almost feel like it brought it back to, the ending brought it back to seeing, how do I word this? Seeing the beginning of how it must have happened with the original people.
Yeah.
And what that, how a person is seduced into, let's call it the ritual, right? Because this movie is based off of several books, and one of them being called The Ritual, right? So I think, you know, because we didn't get the full introduction of the story of the parents and what they were involved in, we did get the understanding of how it somehow was passed down to the children who are now in that house and renting it out. And then you see, right? And then at the very ending, it brings you back to, now we actually got to see the seduction of how that happened, even with the parents, through this new character. So I thought that was very interesting. So what is your lesson learned, Professor, about?
Well, I wanted to see this movie one more time before doing this, because we just saw it. It's one of those movies I think I definitely would want. I need to see it again, and probably another time, because it is one of those movies that's like a think piece a little bit, because I think we could find more clues
and see more things.
It
is one you will watch. You would be happy to watch every year, or to watch again a couple times, because you're gonna see other things. And here's the other thing too, is that they don't leave you alone a long time in stuff. You actually, you get stuff happening all the time. It's gonna go by. Is good. Yeah, it's fun, and it's not, they're not trying to jump scare you constantly, but you are moved along through the story by seeing a lot of things, and it keeps you guessing the whole time, and building that anxiety, because also the girl is struggling, right? So not only is she struggling outside of that house, but she's struggling inside the house with a whole other thing going on. So what is the lesson, Professor?
The lesson, Professor. Never lose sight of, what I got from this is, never lose sight from where you come from, where your ancestors come from, how it's always there with you. Does that make sense?
But I don't see how that's a lesson in the overall story.
It's well,
how does
I think
that
it's a
relate
lesson
to the story?
The lesson, well, I think, well, it's
how
not
would
a
that
lesson.
How would that have helped her?
Well, no. Well, we saw how it helped her in the end. But then I think realization.
No, go. Okay.
So the lesson here is, I think about the main character and where she's from, and as at the end, you know, and the antagonist of this story
that you will come to know.
Yes.
We can't tell you because it would just reveal way
we don't want
too
a
much.
Spoiler. And just understanding our significance of who we are always comes back to remind us who we are or where we're from.
And on a deeper level, the roots of who you are. Okay? Yeah. So even though I pretty much missed that until you brought this up right now, that is a very interesting piece that I didn't even catch until he said this right now. And I think that brings us back to the very beginning, which is, this is why they showed us this and why it was part of this to begin with. Gosh, this is amazing, because see, I didn't catch all that.
It's a recapitulation.
Recapitulation. Okay, so I just saw that as, you know, this is part of her story of where she's from, but the beginning of the story brings us back to the end story, which is, like you said, a full 360 view about knowing where you come from, and that your roots are always going to be part of your roots. And, you know, in any kind of trauma, because there's trauma going on in here to her, you have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's like,
even though she's not working on, like, you know, it's this, like, Uma, they start off, she's a traumatized person.
You get this
she's traumatized at the end, for sure, but
you get it in different ways in different type of movies. So that's always interesting how people put that in. That's always intriguing.
So the archaeological piece, this is something that you can think about when you're watching it now for a deeper significance, is pay attention to where she comes from, the archaeological story, and what happens at the very end. Which
makes you stop and go, oh, okay. But he's got
there's a lot of sub-stories happening in this.
There's little things, so it's very intriguing. If you're into history, or you're into...
keeps you guessing.
You're into people who are into, like, where they come from and their roots. They're the 23andMe people, you know, that are really intrigued like that. I think it brings out all those different things, I think, in this movie. That's what's intriguing about it.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap up. How many screams would you give that 1 to 5?
I think I would say 4.8 screams.
Oh, I was gonna say the same exact thing, that I want to give it 4.8. Because
I wanted more, right? From
4.8 screams, I could have watched more fleshing out of this story. I wanted to be in the house more. I want to watch it again, because I want to see all the things I know I missed, because there's very clever filming going on inside of this house. There's a lot of things to be seen in certain shots, and you almost want to look
symbols.
very closely, because it's like, what am I not seeing in this shot, because it happened so fast. This is a really fun thing to do, where instead of looking at it as a big picture type of movie, you know, going in and just taking in the entire movie, when you've watched it so many times, go back, if you're going to continue to watch this whatever movie, go back in with the intention of watching one character's experience at a time. And you might pick up on their philosophy, how they feel, you know, how they're interacting with certain things in the world that you don't notice, like, because maybe when you're watching it, you're watching them energetically as the interaction of the people talking to each other. But then you could even look at the setting, going in and watching the setting and studying only the house. What are they showing me about the house? You know, what things decoratively did they put up where they were giving me clues, you know? And if you're only focused on that, you're going to really pay attention to other things in the movie that you may have felt, because your body takes in so many ominous things before you can rationally even explain it. Sometimes you can never explain it. That's why it's like instinct, right? You're taking in these things, and like a person feels dangerous, but you don't know why, because this body wisdom takes it in before you can rationally explain why. And you got to listen to that instinct, right? Well, same thing with the setting. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's spooky review. We will be back every Friday. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Actually, leave a comment of how many screams you're giving these movies. We would love to hear from you. Like, subscribe, support, and we will see you back here next week on Friday. Every Friday, we have a new movie review. So we'll see you then. Bye. Keep it spooky.
Even though that's not a saying, it's just fun to say. Look at me when I'm talking to you. It's so stupid. Oh, are you recording?